entering into the more detailed discussion, I wish to ask Erwin Losoy from SPCP to provide us with some housekeeping information that are very important for the good management of the meeting. Erwin, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Secretary General, Council members and observers to the Councils, ladies and gentlemen. Just a very short logistical announcement for everyone. We would like to remind the participants to please keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking. Yeah. Also, when you are speaking, please try to avoid any unnecessary noises such as shuffling of your papers in order to minimize the audio for the interpretation teams. When possibly, we encourage all participants to use a headset with a built-in microphone to improve the quality of the sound. Also, due to the bandwidth, if you're not speaking, we request you to close your video so that we have the better bandwidth. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erwin. And you can see I am following the instructions with the headset because I was told that my audio was not excellent in previous meetings. We continue in virtual meetings. We will have the committee phase in virtual meeting. For the council phase, we'll decide later in October. Unfortunately, it's evolving very well, as I said before, but you know that the building is now open with some constraints, but is open, is accessible, and this will provide us with the opportunity to reflect if it's possible to have council meetings during the committee phase, partially hybrid with the participation, partially presence. We'll see. We'll see later. Now we are starting the 2021st session, and I wish to start giving a warm welcome to new members of the council. We have from Peru, the Ambassador Roberto Hernan Seminario Portocarrero. Welcome to the council. Unfortunately, with this, let's say, arrangements with the virtual meetings, probably to see each other, and I'm sorry for this, but video, Roberto, maybe that we can see you in face. And I wish also to welcome, okay, welcome Roberto Seminario. And from France, we have Ambassador Laurent Pitch, the new representative of France that is joining, I believe, is in quarantine as well, if not still in France. So I will see. We'll meet him. So he's in quarantine. No, I will meet him in virtual meeting. So I'm sure that also to Ambassador from. Unfortunately, we will have some other council members that will leave during this current session, and the new members that will join us during the current session, but we'll have at the proper time. Just another piece. This meeting that is an informal meeting will be full service, but we have to congratulate now the Secretariat that has been able to make arrangements for full interpretation services that will start, I believe, this afternoon with the committee, the finance committee. So this is a good progress. So now we will have a full interpretation services starting from this session. That's very good. Now, this is the first informal meeting or informal briefing on the establishment of the high-level body with the industry. I wish to request this briefing stemming from a decision that was taken by the council during the previous session, when it was decided that informal briefings would provide an opportunity to clarify a range of issues that have been raised in the course of the council considerations of this item, and could require the participation of stakeholders who are not members of the international organizations with observer status to ICAO. In this sense, I wish to underline, and probably you see from the number of participants, that in addition to normal observers, of course, that participate in council meetings, also industry representatives that are less engaged with the council, but are very much engaged with ICAO in terms of contribution on innovation. And they are normally engaged in the innovation fair, in the innovation events. So this participation will be very much fruitful for our discussions and deliberation. As regard the objective and the expected outcomes of this briefing, I wish to recall that as a first step, we will have two briefings. This is the first one. The objective is to identify the current state of play and the possible existing gaps, in how innovation drives ICAO's work program and the standard setting process. Identify relevant experiences and the lessons learned from existing ICAO bodies, such as the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, CART, and this is something that we made experience very recently and very fruitful. Point out the areas for improvement in addressing these gaps, agree on the core objectives and principles that underpin the work on innovation, and review and discuss a series of possible options to address these gaps, including the associated risks and opportunities. These are the objectives, expected results of this briefing. Then we will continue next briefing with the outcomes and the elaboration during the next briefing. Then we will have the discussions in the council on the basis of a proposal of the secretariat that will be stemming from these discussions. As I said before, I have invited a certain number of partners, ICAO partners, that normally are not engaged in the council discussions, but are partners of ICAO in terms of innovation. Amongst them, you have already realized, I have decided in agreement also in consultation with the Secretary General to invite the new established organization called International Partners for Aviation Development, Innovation and Sustainability, or IPADIS, that is chaired by the former President Alio. This is the reason I'm very much glad to see him with us. Let's remind also that this organization has been established also with the support of the ARMA, Roberto Gonzalez, as well as the former Secretary General, Raymond Benjamin. We will have the opportunity to share with them ideas at a proper time. Today is probably more the indeed, and you will have in front of you the agenda of the meeting. Our program is dense, so we need to start. I wanted to just to underline another point. We are going to discuss the establishment of a new body with the industry that will have to provide advice to the council on innovation. And as this is the topic that is innovation, we have a innovative approach in the meeting. As you have seen, rather than having the usual presentations and the discussions from the secretariat, we will have a more interactive framework with the sessions that will be followed by discussions. This is a new framework or a new structure of this briefing that I think will be give us the good opportunity to have fruitful discussions. Having said so, probably I've been speaking too much. You have in front of you the agenda, and now we can start immediately with giving the floor to the Secretary General for the introduction of the briefing. Madam Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Council, members of the ANC, representative of industry, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great pleasure to provide an introduction to today's discussions on the consideration of a high-level body with the industry. The work this matter is in as resolution A40 innovation 93 state formal briefing pursues two objectives. The first objective is to share the work undertaken so far by ICAO on the establishment of a high-level body with the industry in the context of Assembly Resolution A40-27. The second objective is to consult with you first means of presentations made during this informal briefing, and secondly, by means of an online questionnaire which will be circulated at the end of this meeting on the options and working assumption made by the ICAO Secretariat. By reviewing our working processes with you on the topic of innovation, we will then be able to consult with the innovation community at large. The results of this consultation exercise will be presented in the second informal briefing of the Council on Wednesday, 23rd September. Before we start, I would like to provide you with an overview of the most recent and future initiatives taken by ICAO to facilitate the exchange of views and contribution of the innovation community in our technical work. Last week, as you already know, ICAO organized the stock-taking seminar on aviation in sector CO2 emissions reductions. Participants were introduced to novel aircraft technology concepts and sustainable aviation fuel science, and discussed how to boost and implement innovations with a positive impact on the environment. Early this month, ICAO launched the Innovation Gateway, a website which provides access to resources on aviation and innovation, including weekly webinars. It also acts as a primary platform to showcase the latest innovations and provides an opportunity for the innovation community to face concrete challenges it faces. From 8 and December, ICAO will organize a global symposium on the implementation of innovation in aviation. While strategic sessions are foreseen, we decide to encourage innovators to showcase how their products and services can respond to challenges and help progress the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda. Thus, the dialogue on innovation between ICAO, member states, international organizations, representatives from the aviation sector, and innovation community is more than ever vivid and needed. I would like to, after this remark, to pass the floor to Ms. Thilly de Bodt, Acting Head of Strategic Planning, Coordination, and Partnerships Office, who will set the scene for this briefing and our discussions ahead. I wish you all fruitful and inspirational exchanges. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam. Thank you very much, Madam. Thank you. I believe that I have somebody else. Can you hear me?
We can hear.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary General. So, Thilly, please continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Secretary General. Mr. President, Madam Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished Council members, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. As mentioned by the President, the objective of this presentation is to provide you with more context in support of our meeting today and actually explain and introduce to you what has happened so far between the adoption of the resolution A4027 and today. Actually, we have 4 buckets or components of work that have happened, which structure ICAO's work on the high-level body with the industry. And these 4 components are the current gaps. We've done an analysis. Areas for improvement, we looked into that. Core objectives and principles, we went through the thought process. And finally, possible options, we have a number of options to propose to you. And each component will be reviewed in further details during each of the 4 sessions today. So the starting point of our work on the high-level body is the adoption of the Assembly Resolution A4027, Innovation in Aviation, in October of last year. And this resolution requests 5 different actions, 4 of which are directed to the Council and 1 to Member States. All clauses are, of course, as you see in the slides, interrelated. And the potential of the A4027 resolution to drive change lays within the compound power and effect of these 5 clauses as they are being implemented. So today we're specifically looking at 2 of the clauses. First, clause number 2, which directs the Council to assess the need as well as the resources required to evolve the processes of the organization, including its working methods with the industry, in order to keep pace with innovations that affect sustainable development of aviation, civil aviation. And secondly, clause number 5 directs the Council to urgently consider the establishment of a high-level body with the industry to regularly provide strategic advice to the Council concerning innovation in aviation. So since the adoption of the resolution, next slide please, ICAO has intensified its engagement with the industry as part of its formal decision-making process and in context of outreach activities. And this dynamic was reinforced by the Council in last June, acknowledging that discussions on the high-level body could require the participation of stakeholders who are not members of international organizations with observer status to ICAO. So the 2 informal briefings today and next week are a result of this observation. In July, ICAO also fine-tuned an assessment of current ICAO practices with the industry on innovation. This also will feed in to today's discussions. And all these which you see on the screen are examples just now of how ICAO engages with innovators, primarily through knowledge sharing and discussions. But is this enough? An assessment of current ICAO practices in relation to innovation was conducted and was shared in June during the 220th session of the Council, and was further refined over the summer. And the conclusions of this assessment remain valid, meaning that most of the existing ICAO processes and work structures are fit for purpose with respect to dealing with emerging issues, including innovation. But while this is reassuring, challenges remain, which have made it increasingly difficult to address innovation systematically and thoroughly. These challenges, for instance, of technological developments and their integration in SARPs. In other words, it's difficult to keep with innovations. Mainly to a significant lack of resources, both financial and human. Regulators and in ICAO to keep up with innovations. Innovations are also being developed by suppliers that are not in the traditional aviation supply chain and are not members of the international, or are not represented by the international organizations accredited to ICAO. And some of these innovations actually are being developed by companies that have little or have no links with aviation. So here then comes our problem statement. ICAO is not yet able to support fully the deployment of innovations to help international aviation to be more responsive, and also as the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Now, once we have the problem statement, and these have been presented to the Council in the 220th session. Better streamlining, an approach to better streamline innovation, and this will surely can surely be taken forward by the high-level framework being developed. Efficient knowledge sharing and communication to support the Council in its work. Innovation is primarily conducted at the technical level and would be useful to support the Council in its decision making. So I think we need to be looking into how to actually make sure that communication even happens more adequately with the Council. Enhance ICAO's outreach to stakeholders, including industry. Seminar that just took place last week, and the previous one in 2019, as well as our innovations. We have witnessed the participation of many companies that are active in domains like blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, renewable energy, but these members are not part of the ICAO observer organizations. And then, of course, we have looking into drive debate on innovation is another area of potential improvement, that can be done to looking into combined action of advocacy and partnerships and resource mobilization. And then we come to the potential creation of the high-level body with the industry. Now, as stated in the beginning of this presentation, the potential to drive change really lays within this interaction of the 5 clauses of the 5 actions as mandated by the ICAO. The slide illustrates that the high-level body with the industry doesn't necessarily take care of everything. As we just take an example of areas of improvement. But you could see there that it needs to be working tandem with the policy on innovation. Policy of innovation, more able to streamline the approaches to make sure that there is a efficient knowledge sharing, to look at ICAO, the international that looks at of priority challenges and solutions to integrate innovation at the strategic level, and then this will then lead to further reinforce ICAO as an international forum for exchange on aviation and innovation. So while the objective is to pursue a mechanism that would enhance the engagement of the ICAO Council, the industry at the strategic level on innovation, certain principles have to be maintained. And these principles are transparency, independence, efficiency of the current practices, but they would contribute to the forging of high-level and the strategic solutions that should be prioritized. Good governance principles apply as we in the in its implementation. And then last but not least, if the decision should be made that the creation of a high-level body with industry needed, well, then the council probably should also be looking at the options of structures and modalities of operation. And in the course of the ICAO discussions on the possible establishment of such a body, a range of options have emerged. They will be presented in further detail during the fourth session of today. They are not exclusive of other ideas, of course, that may come up during the discussions, but they will be a starting point towards an objective and comparable assessment. They will help ICAO to be more responsive vis-à-vis the solutions that innovation can bring to the challenges that the aviation sector and society face today and in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thilly, for providing the council with the frame within which the discussions will be developed during this informal briefing. We'll follow the following approach. Edwin Losoy from the SPCP, Strategic Planning, Coordination and Partnership Office, to outline and to introduce the session and the speakers, and then we will go with the presentations and with the discussions. So Edwin, please introduce the first session.
Thank you, Mr. President, and also thank you, Thilly, for the introduction and setting the scene for this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are on the globe. Switch over to the main content of this informal briefing. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you the 4 upcoming very interesting sessions. The format of each session is to have 2 presentations of around 10 minutes, no longer than 10 minutes, and then followed by a discussion period. Because of the short time of this briefing, I would like to remind that only council members and official industry representatives are allowed to pose the questions. The remaining industry representatives are kindly reminded to keep their mics on mute during the discussion, during the duration of the briefing. You will have the opportunity, however, to fill out a question that will be sent out to you by the end of this first informal briefing. Your valuable feedback will then be used for the second informal briefing, along with the recommendations from today. So, now I would like to introduce the first session. What are ICAO's current gaps in dealing with innovation? ICAO has addressed innovation in a 75-year history with great success. But during the past 5 to 6 years, there has been a significant increase in the pace of development and also in the application of new technologies and concepts of operation within the aviation sector. And as a result, ICAO faces a number of challenges. So in order to give an answer on how to adapt the accelerating pace of innovation, we need to establish the gap between the state of play of ICAO's current capabilities and what is needed to face the future. So, Mr. President, I will give you back the floor to introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erwin. So Ulrich is the first speaker of the first session. Ulrich is one of the most senior in the position of council member and now newly appointed the coordinator of the European representative. Ulrich, the floor is yours.
So can you?
Yeah.
You see me? Oh yes, I can see myself.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. President, thank you, and Madam Secretary, Mr. Losoy, and good morning, colleagues and I must say, after the introduction from Mrs. de Bodt, I wonder what is left for me, because in essence she has already given my presentation, so there will be a lot of overlaps, and I'm not quite sure if the expectations can be met with my brief presentations. But the question that was posed to me is, what are ICAO current gaps in dealing with innovations? So this emanates from the last council in June of this year, where there was a feeling that it was necessary the proposal to establish a high-level body with industry and then determine the solution to best address the identified problem. There were a number of clarifications sought on what constitutes innovation, and views were expressed that just one annual meeting with industry to discuss its state clearly was insufficient. So views were expressed that a gap analysis might help the Council in its further deliberations. When I looked at the question, I initially started to take sort of an, let's say, academic view on this issue. What do we mean by innovation? What did we do in the past? Why do we suddenly have the need to change our working procedures? What is different from previous periods in aviation's history? Do we really have significant gaps in our interaction, etc., etc.? So, but this quickly became very complicated and unwieldy, and it would definitely provoke more questions than provide any answers to the topic at hand. So I switched more or less direction, and rather than making things even more complicated than they are, more academic than they are discussed, I try to make it simple, very simple, and give you my personal views on this issue. And this is important. I was introduced as in the function of European coordinator. That's fine and that's true. But the views I express here and today are my personal this issue. So to find an answer to the question posed, what or where are our gaps in dealing with innovation? Let us just go back to the Assembly Resolution A4027, which in its resolving clause 5 consider the establishment of industry to regularly strategic advice to the Council concerning innovation in aviation. And in this resolving clause 5 alone, we find already one potential gap in dealing with innovation, which is regular interaction with industry on a high level. That apparently is, in the opinion of our member states, missing. If you look at the parts of A4027 that eventually lead to resolving clause 5, the high level body with industry, our member states have the feeling that there is a need to ensure that the real and potential benefits and challenges that innovation can bring to the safety, efficiency, security, facilitation, and to the economic and environmental sustainability of air transport should be realized in a manner that leaves no country behind. This is the third whereas clause of the resolution. So apparently another gap. Apparently our procedures do not cover this. Then the resolution goes on. Our member states also believe that there's insufficient continued interaction with industry to identify the latest technological developments and their timely integration, thereby potentially preventing the materialization of their benefits in aviation. That's in the recognizing clause, the next gap. And our member states feel that the process of pace with the innovations that affect sustainable development of civil aviation. This is resolving clause 2 of the resolution. So it's more or less, in essence, these are the gaps in dealing with innovation identified during the last assembly. And it doesn't really matter if we personally agree or disagree and go into even more detailed academic discussions on this one. What matters is that the majority of our member states feel that we have to improve in these areas, that our working methods with respect to innovation are no longer up to date to address those concerns. So one of the questions then remains, why it is now nearly 76 years after ICAO was established, that we, our member states, suddenly have the feeling that we are left behind, or some member states feel left behind when it comes to innovation in aviation. Did we do something wrong in the past? Wasn't aviation always at the forefront of innovation over the past 7 decades? Well, ICAO uses many ways to interact with its stakeholders. We have study groups, panels, symposia, seminars, conferences. We have high-level, and it was indeed very successful in the past, and actually ICAO still is very successful in handling innovations. Among many things, ICAO dealt with future air navigation systems. It was fancy back to the eventually to satellite-based navigation and communication, and decades later, eventually even to things like the Global Air Navigation Plan. Environmental issues. We started with noise requirements through the Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection. Now we are all the way up to CO2 standards and CORSIAs to alleviate the negative of. And the work back then laid the basis for future industry strategies, whether this was on ATM issues or the environment or others. So clearly our past was a success story. And today we are again dealing efficiently and successfully with innovation by holding this and other meetings in a virtual setting. This was unthinkable just 6 months ago. So innovation is nothing ICAO has to be afraid of. The difference, however, compared to the past is that all this latest innovation, they do not come from the aviation sector, and they come fast, very fast. And this pace is just one of the elements of a changed environment aviation is operating in. And it was also said by Mrs. de Bodt, we are getting more and more different partners. Innovations in aviation are no longer more or less exclusive to aviation or even developed exclusively for aviation. Things like artificial intelligence were developed outside aviation, already widely used commercially, for example, in the banking sector. And artificial intelligence will undoubtedly quickly find its way into all areas of civil aviation. So not only for booking and marketing purposes, what is very well established already, but it will also end up in air traffic control, in the cockpit, for flight planning purposes, maybe for emergency procedures and what have you. There is a wide range of innovation that is coming up that is developed originally not for aviation. And the problem here is that ICAO in the past had little or no contact with leading industry players in those or similar areas that could give details about potential applications in aviation and envisage timelines for implementation. With the new concepts we had discussed in the past, like urban air mobility, they also involve players from outside ICAO's classic counterparts. We have small and medium-sized enterprises that actually do drive innovations. They are not necessarily organized in that type of international organizations we are usually dealing with. And the pace, and I mentioned this already, of technological advancement is much faster than in previous decades and much more dynamic. So I think it's clear that one yearly meeting to hear about the state of the industry from our accredited and highly valued industry partners is no longer enough to capture what's going on in the industry and where it is heading to. And one air navigation conference every 10 years is also not sufficient to cope with innovations that are happening at a fast pace. The current COVID crisis, the establishment of the CART with the involvement of industry partners that are usually not directly involved in ICAO's work, has proven extremely valuable to develop guidance for the sector to find its way out of this unprecedented situation. Can innovation help on the way to recovery? Technology and from societal point of view? Probably yes. So these few examples alone show already the need and the possibilities for a new approach to dealing with new developments and with new industry partners. So to make a long story short, and to come back to the problem at hand, I do not read A4027 resolving clause 5 as a request to the Council to consider in principle the establishment of a high-level body with industry, but rather go ahead with it and urgently remove any obstacles that might be in the way, like, for example, institutional issues, financial issues, our overall work program, our strategic objectives. ICAO is a government agency. a UN agency, and the format for direct dealings with industry has to ensure that our character as an independent UN agency serving all our member states cannot be put into question. And policy making and policy decision in our context is a prerogative of our member states. On a technical level, the recently established ANC talks directly with industry have proven to be highly productive and successful. They are well received, both within and outside of ICAO. And it was also mentioned by Mrs. de Bodt, it was just last week that ICAO had a very interesting seminar with high-level attendance from big and smaller companies. And it was refreshing to hear CEOs talk about their vision, engagement, and commitment for sustainable aviation fuel and the use of hydrogen in aviation. And it became very clear that this is an issue not only for aviation, but for all modes of transport and beyond. And it requires significant commitment and investment in the future to make it happen. And different technologies are evolving to achieve those goals. And ICAO has to be well prepared to allow for timely introduction. So I cannot see any insurmountable obstacle to quickly set up a mechanism for regular and direct council interaction with industry on a strategic level to discuss innovation in aviation in the context of A4027. And with the virtual meetings now widely accepted, such interaction can also be organized in an efficient and very cost-effective way. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ulrich, for your absolutely interesting and clear presentation. Now we go straight forward to next presentation that is from Eric Fanning, who is the chairperson of the International Coordination Council of Aerospace Industries Association. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to everyone. On behalf of the International Coordinating Council of Aerospace Industries Associations, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss some possible avenues for the formation of a high-level body with industry. And it sounds to me like we are in pretty strong agreement already. For those of you who aren't aware, ICCAIA is the voice of the global aerospace manufacturing community. Our 6 member associations from the United States, Europe, Japan, Russia, Canada, and Brazil represent a diverse range of companies from established airframe and engine manufacturers to innovative startups looking at future platforms. What all the companies we represent have in common, though, is innovation and a desire to innovate and make the world a better place. Next slide, please. We know ICAO understands the importance of innovation in fostering international civil aviation. You have had a remarkable history in helping to build a system that has allowed aviation to thrive and effectively capitalized on evolving technologies. Over 75 years ago, the world was at war, yet the authors of the Chicago Convention took a pause from the immediate crisis to consider the future of aviation. Through their combined strategic vision and recognition that technology had developed to the point where it could eventually connect the world, they developed the enduring framework that forms the very basis for our international aviation system of today. We are faced with yet another global crisis today. COVID-19 represents an immediate threat to our citizens, economies, and our industry. At the same time, advancements in civil aviation continue to emerge at an incredible pace. Like those leaders 75 years ago, we should explore how our community can benefit from innovation during this crisis and beyond. We should take advantage of this critical juncture and develop the long-term and strategic planning that is needed to build on ICAO's success to date and fulfill the aspirations of the Chicago Convention. Since the 1950s, ICAO has helped democratize air transport and made it accessible to nearly all. Today, our civil aviation system connects almost any 2 points on the globe through safe, secure, and regular service, and in an increasingly sustainable manner. The convening capability of ICAO brings together states and industry and enables us to effectively collaborate in addressing the safety, security, and now public health issues that can threaten the continued growth of our industry. Next slide, please. Over its history, ICAO has always struck an appropriate balance between state governance and working with industry. As ICCAIA, we are proud to participate as members or observers in all the major ICAO fora, including all the technical panels. But the speed of innovation in civil aviation is rapidly outpacing the capability of regulators worldwide to respond in a timely manner. And that means ICAO's existing working methods may require rethinking to keep pace with the speed and nature of today's technological developments. Next slide, please. Emerging forms of air transport, as well as rapidly expanding capabilities of existing vehicles, have the capacity to transform our economy and our economies and lives. The rapid proliferation of UAS or drones and the emergence of urban air mobility, combined with the automation and digitization in our existing systems, are changing the very landscape of our industry. New entrants and emerging technologies offer wonderful opportunities, but they also present new challenges as we seek to safely integrate them into our finite aerospace. The nature of the innovation is changing as well. It has increasingly driven by the private sector and has frequently outpaced the capabilities of many regulators to react fast enough. As a result, we have already seen many civil aviation authorities grapple with how to regulate UAS. While this was originally considered a domestic issue, these challenges have led many states to look to ICAO to provide regulatory guidance that will facilitate harmonized and efficient operation. At the same time, the underlying technologies being regulated are coming from areas of the industry that were not traditionally participating in the ICAO framework. To rise to these challenges in the future, we are therefore going to require an even higher level of collaboration with industry. This means not just advancing the development of regulatory frameworks, but also rethinking how new technologies can be regulated and developing the strategies that ensure that the right work is being done by the right entities at the right time, and all within our increasingly constrained resources. And we're going also to have to speak to a wider segment of industry. As an industry association, we are committed to reaching out to new entrants and helping them engage with ICAO and the aviation culture on these strategic issues. Next slide, please. So how do we start to address these developing concerns? ICAO's response to the COVID-19 crisis may hold some answers. The CART initiative is an outstanding example of how states and industry can collaborate in an agile and dynamic manner to meet a pivotal threat to our industry. And our shared experience in this effort may provide insights on the way forward as you consider the establishment of a high-level industry body to provide you with strategic advice needed in the future. Through CART, you were able to galvanize the entire civil aviation community to work in a collaborative effort to address our shared challenge. It was clear from the beginning of this initiative that it would be guided by states through the ICAO Council. The Council set the objectives and maintained its oversight of the product, yet you gave latitude to the stakeholders to work in a dynamic fashion. As we turn our attention today to our shared challenge in addressing the fast pace of innovation, this example of what we can do together paves the way for us to work in the future. On behalf of ACI, CANSO, IATA, and ICCAIA, we recognize that ICAO has established time-proven methods for industry to effectively engage with the ongoing work of ICAO. We value this engagement and look forward to our ongoing contribution to this work. However, at this juncture, we feel that it is time to rethink some of the existing working methods. In the past, industry has engaged with the Council on a strategic level during the once-yearly State of the Industry briefings, as well as the opportunities to participate in your off-site strategy meetings. But these opportunities are limited and have not permitted industry to engage in far-reaching strategic dialogues with the Council. We have also heard from the Council and the Secretary General the desire for increased input of this nature. So in response to the resolution adopted last year at the Assembly, we proposed the formation of an innovation consultative body that would facilitate a regular dialogue between the Council of ICAO and senior executive levels of the industry. It is essential that ICAO retain its leadership under the convention as the standard-setting organization on the use of airspace. It is not our intent to disrupt the established process of the Council or its subsidiary bodies, nor those of a well-established process within the Secretariat. Our aim is to contribute our expertise and observations on the most current technological developments in the industry as you form your strategic approaches to the future. We are also cognizant that the establishment of such a body could result in additional cost to ICAO. We are therefore committed to providing our human resources as Secretariat to support this body, including the development of any reports for submission to the Council through the ICAO Secretariat. The general concepts of such a body are outlined in a white paper that we have submitted to the President of the Council and the Secretary General. This white paper is jointly sponsored by ACI, CANSO, IATA, and ICCAIA, and it is intended to contribute an industry view during your deliberations. 75 years ago, leaders like those gathered together today took steps to revolutionize global civil aviation for the betterment of all people. Now we have another opportunity to forge a better future. And together, we can make the changes we need today to create a more innovative and improved and inclusive world tomorrow. Mr. President, members of the Council, thank you again for this opportunity to speak to you on this important subject.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. As usual, the industry representatives are pragmatic and they went already to a proposal. But we are still in the context of before opening the floor for discussions, let me underline 2 or 3 points. First of all, Ulrich has underlined that innovation is part of our story, is a success story of aviation. Last week, by the way, there's been an interesting speech of Bertrand Piccard in the stock-taking seminar, who now support us that is introducing some new challenges to our working methods. He underlined also that the gaps actually are already identified in the resolution for A4027. That's absolutely evident indeed. Intervention of Eric Fanning, he has underlined, first of all, that it's true that the challenges derive now from the innovation, but from a new mode of transportations that have been evolving, and also because technologies or innovations sometimes are introduced in aviation in fields or domain that are not in the domain of competence itself of ICAO, when we talk about, for example, artificial intelligence or blockchain. Very interesting, and indeed yesterday he sent me a white paper that I will share with the Council after this informal briefing. The proposal of establishment of the innovation consultative body. So Fanning went directly straight to a proposal to be discussed, of course, to be a little better understood, but is already one, by the way, is one of the options that were discussed already by the Council during the 220 session. And now we have already a proposal outlining the document that I will share with the Council after the briefing. Now we start with a discussion. I wish to remind, we are already late. So I wish to remind to try to stay in 10 minutes our discussion, to keep our discussion on this specific session in 10 minutes and focus for the time being on what has been mentioned, what has been said, presented by the 2 speakers on gaps, and has been underlined also by the chairperson of ICCAIA, a possible establishment of the innovation consulting body. So now the floor is open for interventions, comments. I wish, as has been said by Erwin Lassoy at the beginning, I will take only comments or interventions from Council members and from the observers that normally participate in Council meetings. For the others, I wish to invite them. I hope they will understand. We are almost reaching 200 participants in this meeting. They will have a questionnaire that can be shared after the briefing. So the floor is open for comments. If anybody wants to intervene or to comment or to open the discussion, it's now up to you. For the time being, I don't see hand raised. Maybe that we are satisfied, so probably is not really needed. No, I see that the alternate representative of France, Eric Risse, has raised the hand first. Let's remind that France presented the paper in the Assembly that then brought to the decision in the Assembly resolution A4027. So Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and Mrs. Secretary General. And the COVID-19 pandemic affecting our industry may have delayed our work on this file, but this exceptional time and context makes even more urgently the need for ICAO Council to better connected with industry. The crisis is forcing our manufacturers to accelerate critical technological choices even more quickly than before. ICAO must be more connected with these changes at high level. CARP is a good example of cooperation with industry and has validated the concept. We must continue on this path today. We identified 4 gaps. There is a time lag. The first one, there is a time lag between technological development and the harmonization work of the international standard and policies. Regarding drones, the environment, or cyber security, we can help to increase the response time of ICAO and the anticipation of these technically complex areas. Second, at the global level, societal changes are increasingly strong. Environment, technological choices, health, rejection of air transport, etc. However, these global and societal subjects can be more perfectly taken into account by ICAO and be discussed at strategic level and not technical level between the industry and the organization. Third, there is a long tradition and practice of technical dialogues between experts within working groups and panels at ICAO. However, we can improve the feedback between the top, the ICAO Council, and the bottom, the panels, and help to these experts more political guidance. 4, of course, briefing with industry exists and are useful, but it is not sufficient. They do not lead to reports or follow-up, and at the end, they are not sufficiently operational. In conclusion, it's not about replacing panels, the Secretariat working groups, the Council, or the Air Navigation Commission, or the normalization process. Today, we need a high-level strategic, regular, and political dialogue between industry and the Council, which for the moment does not exist, in order to provide insight and guidance for the Council, which it can consider independently. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric, for your intervention. Thank you very much. I shall underline what has been said also by Ulrich regarding the gaps in terms of response time, in terms of strategic guidance. Representative of Spain, Victor Aguado.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning to everybody. I think the presentations, they are converging on the need to take action, but I would like to stress a couple ideas that were mentioned by the speakers already and by the intervention of France. And this is the importance of the dimension of the strategic interaction. Innovation, probably we will have to define what is innovation, but what it is important is the strategic approach to any action that is needed by the industry and by ICAO itself. It is true that the technology is moving fast, and then we will have to adopt and adapt our procedures and the way of working within ICAO. But this can be done from a procedural point of view. The difficulty is to understand what is coming from the future. And the difficulty is to identify what ICAO needs to do vis-a-vis what is coming from the future. So simply stressing the point of the strategic dimension more than just technology or research is the strategic approach from ICAO to what is coming. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative of Spain, for this point. I wanted to stress what you said in connection with the discussions held last week in the stock-taking seminar. When we have in front of us, potentially in 15, 20 years, the introduction in service of electrical aircraft or hydrogen-powered aircraft, This is something that we have to start to understand now. We need to understand where the international transport is evolving, and not to just follow up what is being already initiated by the industry, but to be prepared, because these challenges are huge challenges for the international aviation, are huge challenges for ICAO. Thank you very much, Representative of Spain. I don't see other requests of interventions. Actually, we are in the domain of gaps that have already been discussed in the Assembly during the last session. The comments from France and from Spain are absolutely interesting and relevant. I do believe that we can move to the second session, that is on the areas of improvements. So there is a close connection with the previous session. And again, I will give the floor to Eric Lassoy to introduce the rationale of this second session, and then the speakers, of course.
Thank you, Mr. President. Session 2 is entitled, What are the areas for improvement? So it forms the logical step after our previous session where we discussed the gaps. However, you have to keep in mind that, as mentioned earlier, ICAO has already its mechanisms in place to address innovation. To name a few, we have our committees, we have our panels, we organize public events that provide a tremendous source of information. And also we are going more and more in the area of performance-based standards that leave room for innovative products and services to enter the market. However, despite having these numerous initiatives and mechanisms already in place, there could be useful opportunities to further enhance the integration of innovation in ICAO's strategic, as was just mentioned by the Spain representative, and technical work. Mr. President, the floor is yours again.
Thank you very much, Erwin. So we will have first the presentation of a representative of Japan on the areas, ICAO Fukushima, on the areas of improvements, and then we have the participation of Mr. Sorry for the name, Chernishev from Moscow. I believe he's in Moscow right now, who is the chair of the International Forum for Aviation Research, IFAR. IFAR has addressed the innovation inside the organization in terms of a dialogue with the industry. So it's very important to understand their experience. But we start now with the representative of Japan, Isao Fukushima. Isao, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see you again in the first meeting of the 21st session. First of all, it's a great honor to be one of the speakers representing the Montreal Group, Asia Pacific Regional Group of the Council. The theme of my presentation today is what are the areas for improvement. My presentation will be divided into 3 parts. I'll start by setting the context of the presentation. After that, I will show you some thoughts on the potential areas for improvement that I identified thanks to comments of our colleagues of the Asia Pacific region. Finally, I will introduce my personal recommendations on the topic. I will do my best to be brief in the limit of 10 minutes. Next, please. The purpose of my presentation is to give you some key points of the issue and to trigger subsequent discussion in the coming formal meetings in the committee and in the council. I would like to share the thoughts and the suggestions on this theme by the countries in the Pacific region. I have had some hesitations in accepting to be one of the speakers today because my government's position on this issue has been rather reluctant to the establishment of the body. But I am putting aside my official position. I would not present my definitive view, any definitive views of the region nor of my government. Before the council makes a decision on this issue, it is necessary to identify the potential areas for improvement. Thanks to the Secretariat's excellent work, my presentation will be based upon the areas identified in the working paper CWP 15043. Next, please. Let me recapture here the areas mentioned in the working paper. There have been 8 points. 1 to 4 are existing processes, mechanisms, and activities. And 5 to 8 are possible opportunities to further enhance the integration of innovation identified in the working paper. Next slide, please. For the first area, in our opinion, public events might provide more useful inputs, goals, and objectives to us if they are organized with an overall big picture on innovation. Otherwise, each event would remain standalone. We had also a practical suggestion from a delegation in the group that under the current COVID-19 pandemic, it might be difficult to organize various fairs and public events physically, so the online webinars will be useful as a platform. Next, please. For the second and third points, I put together 2 points in one page. The council is actually in the discussion on the committee reorganization. We could review the terms of reference to ensure the integrated approach in terms of innovation. Also, to proactively respond with rapid technological advancement, the format of ad hoc expert group would be useful if it reports directly to the council on a particular subject, although this format has been, in most of cases, reporting to the Secretariat. Next slide, please. Annexes to the convention. For the annexes to the convention, in our opinion, real change is not necessary to the current concept. As pointed out in the working paper, due respect to technological neutrality is fundamental to ICAO's work. However, in considering the rapid pace of technological development in aviation, the rule-making process of our organization might need to be used. Next, please. For the fifth point, as it is made clear in the 40th Assembly, a high-level innovation framework is necessary for the Council in its function of rule-making. We have to consider the framework in order to ensure the timely development of global policies and standards, and facilitate synergies between strategic objectives. Next, please. For the 6th and 7th points, they are certainly important points, but not especially in innovation, but in all issues of the ICAO. They should be taken into consideration in our subsequent discussion on high-level framework in order that efficient knowledge sharing and communication will support the Council in its work. Next, please. For the last area, for better global debate on innovation, there is a potential to prioritize innovation matters over the other work of ICAO. Regarding this point, we should not lose sight of the fundamental implementation of SAPs by the member states as a priority for ICAO. We also had comments that it is important to engage member states through surveys and questionnaires to better understand their real needs. Next, please. Based on these reflections on these areas for improvement, I would now like to move on to the third part of my presentation, recommendations from my personal perspective. Firstly, a high-level innovation framework is necessary per assembly resolution, but we need to take into consideration various views and opinions, including what I presented so far, to ensure the timely development of global policies and standards that support the continuous improvement of safety, efficiency, security, facilitation, economic, and environmental performance of civil aviation. In order to keep pace with innovations that affect the development of civil aviation, this innovation framework would be one of the processes used to support the Council decision-making. Secondly, we need to keep in clear view that the member states are the ultimate decision makers. To be specific, ICAO's fundamental role is to assist its member states, as stated in the Chicago Convention. And so we should consider the needs of every member state, of its 193 member states. Next, please. Finally, when we consider the development of high-level framework, it is recommended that we should clarify the concepts of the framework. For example, we are using terms such as innovation, industry, and high level. But what is innovation, what is industry, and what is high level in this context? It is vital to define these concepts in order to set the scope of the framework. Innovation might have a different meaning to different stakeholders. Same for industry and high level. Based on the understanding that innovation framework should be used to support the Council's decision-making and to ensure the timely development of global policies and standards, we have to clarify the definition of high level. Do you mean high level experts, high level administrators, or high level political leaders? Certainly not honorary dignitaries. Another important concept which we should clarify is whether the innovation agenda will stand alone as an independent issue within ICAO, or will it be embedded in existing methods, capabilities, and programs. We have traditional agendas like as safety, security, facilitation, and environment, etc., vertically distinct. But innovation affects our work all across the agendas in horizontal way. Mr. President, dear representatives, distinguished invitees, to finish, I hope that my presentation gave you help to consider this issue for subsequent discussion. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative of Japan. And your intervention, once again, gives me the opportunity to underline that the speakers have been chosen as a regional coordinators in order to facilitate the preparation of presentations, but as underlined already several times, do not represent positions at the regional level. We are in a brainstorming, if you wish, discussion in elaboration. We are not in a decision-making process at this stage. And of course, in this sense, in some occasions, contributions could not coincide with positions of governments taken during the assembly. This is something that must be acknowledged. And thank you very much, the representative of Japan, for having mentioned again. Very interesting. In one of the slides, the reference to the review of the working methods of committees and groups in ICAO, because this could be part of the elaborations on the closer relationship between the council and the industry at the strategic level on innovation in aviation. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Now I will ask to take the floor to Sergei Chernoshev, that is the chair of International Forum for Aviation Research, IFAR. As I mentioned before, they have made an experience in establishing a closer relationship with the industry on innovation, and probably this experience could be interesting for us. So, Mr. Chernoshev, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me from Moscow and a privilege to participate today in this informal ICAO briefing as a representative of 26 global aeronautical research institutions. With our 10 years of existence, we are a relatively young organization compared to World Aviation itself or ICAO. However, we feel that after these initial years, we could contribute more on a larger scale and with other global organizations. This first informal briefing is aimed to collect and discuss the views on the current ICAO practices in relation to innovation. However, as we are just about to explore our ways of collaboration with ICAO, we would like to initially share with you who we are, where we are coming from, and what our mission is. Some recommendations will follow. We started IFAR. Next slide, please. Okay, so come back, please. Yes, thank you. We started IFAR in 2010, and IFAR stands for International Forum for Aeronautics Research, Aviation Research. And now we have been growing, assembling 26 national research centers, in total with approximately 34,000 researchers. Only one establishment per nation can join IFAR. And as you can see, we probably represent something like 90% of the major aeronautical research institutions around the world. IFAR's main goals can be shortly described as information exchange, where we identify global priority research, challenges for common action, networking with our yearly high-level summits. We connect all the principles, cooperation, in order to simulate innovation and improve our research achievements through collaborative activities. Education, where we foster the next generation of global aeronautics engineers and scientists. And last but not least, communication, including the informed aviation-related policies based on solid research and common IFAR discussions. Next slide, please. Okay, that's fine. IFAR members usually work within the TRL technology readiness level range from 1 to 9, where the lower TRLs are normally shared with universities. The levels up to demonstrations are the typical domain of the research establishments, while the higher TRLs are executed under industry contracts. The second message on this slide is hidden in the graph, which is just a conceptual view on the fact that between universities and the public sector, it is the research establishment, it is the IFAR member who is acting as the unique organization in the middle, which is supporting industry and advancing innovation. Next slide, please. As we have seen, IFAR members work across their full TRL 1 through 9 range. In that role, they typically provide large-scale infrastructure, research infrastructure, and prepare technology foresight, strategic research and development, and technical services, foster consortia for larger scale technology demonstration projects, such as the EU and North American partners, for example, BLADE and ICAO, make connections between SMEs and upper tier suppliers and OEMs. And very important, they are a neutral consultant to society and public. Next, please. As example, for a successful cooperation only among IFAR members, and also to present the scale of operation, I can show you here the Access project about alternative fuel effect on contrails and cruise emissions. This flight test conducted emission measurements using both traditional jet fuel and a blend of traditional fuel with alternative jet fuel. Data were obtained over a range of flight conditions and separation distances. A full set of important data were collected, analyzed, and shared among the partners and discussed with the industry. Next slide, please. Another typical example is BLADE project, a highly collaborative project on direct reduction with laminar wings, which demonstrates the ability to convene industry partners, mature promising technologies, while maintaining scientific rigor and impartiality, and which involved the multiple IFAR partners. On the picture, you can see some well-known principles from the aviation world, industry, and research establishments. Next one, please. In line with the objectives of this meeting, let me show you some facts on IFAR's approach. We have a holistic end-to-end view of the aerospace innovation system. Our advantage here is based on the fact that we develop a proof of concept for disruptive technologies, provide a scientific basis for regulators for informed rulemaking, convene key players in industry, academia, and government, and provide strategic long-term vision to technological trends. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, we see the need to further deepen and strengthen our collaboration with industry to become a dependable partner with a long-term commitment. We are engaging more deeply with regulators to enable innovation, building more sustainable long-term industry partnership to de-risk and accelerate innovation in the uptake. Growing IFAR's industrial collaborative efforts globally beyond regions. Building resilience in the aviation sector to pandemics. Building a sustainable future for aviation. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we not only could provide you with some information about IFAR, but also with some simulating ideas about the way forward. This might be now a good starting point to commonly identify in what processes, in what areas, and how we could serve the community best and eventually contribute to accelerate innovations to the benefit of society and industry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. And of course, together with my colleagues, head of Canadian NRC, National Research Center, Ibrahim Yimir, and head of Aeronautics from Germany, DLR, Rolf Henke. We are happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Cheryshev, for your interesting presentation provided from Moscow. Indeed, the research innovation are almost equivalent, and the relationship with the industry is absolutely a fundamental element. And now, my intention is to follow to continue in this way. My feeling is that to have discussions, sessions by sessions, probably is not the best way to proceed. So I wish to ask you if you have a specific question or request of a clarification on the presentation of this session, please raise the hand, and of course I will give you the floor. Otherwise, it would be better to concentrate the discussion at the end of the 4 sessions before the conclusions. This is my suggestion, recommendation, because I understand that we, first of all, we are a little bit late, but also there is an issue that probably is better during this council briefing to have a more comprehensive discussions on the presentations and on the way forward. So in this sense, if I ask you if you have any question that we wish to raise or any comments that you wish to have you have on the specific presentations. If this is not the case, I don't believe that this is the case because I don't see any hand rise. I wish to thank very much the representative of Japan and the chairperson of the IFAR, Chairman Chef, for their interesting presentations. And now, according to our agenda, we take 15 minutes break. It's 11:30, so we will be back at 11:45 sharp. We take a cup of coffee, and we'll continue with the 2 following sessions. So 15 minutes break. Let's be back at 11:45.
Check 1, 2.
Okay, so it's time to start again. And now we go to the third session of this very interesting briefing, informal briefing of the Council. And we go to the third session with the introduction by Erwin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So welcome back. We had some very good discussions, presentations about the gaps and the areas for improvements regarding innovation. However, before we can actually discuss the options for a high-level body, it's very important to get a better insight on the core objectives and principles of ICAO's work on innovation. These principles are derived from the very nature of ICAO being a specialized agency from the United Nations with 193 member states. The following presentations in session 3 provide some clear perspectives, and hopefully the subsequent discussions will give us some food for thought. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Erwin. So now we go with the presentation of the representative of Sudan on what are the core objectives and principles of ICAO's work on innovation. And this presentation will be followed by the President of the Navigation Commission. So, Representative of Sudan, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Madam Secretary General, colleagues, guests, ladies and gentlemen. This presentation about 3 issues. The first is the 40th session of the Assembly that was held in 2019, the main contents of the presentation and recommendations. Next slide, please. The 40th session of the Assembly, there is the main resolution, which is resolution 27. Out of the 27 resolution, we are going to focus on 3 points. Assess the need and the resources required. And this is about how to evolve the processes of the organization, including its working methods with the industry in order to keep pace, quickness with the innovation that affect the sustainable development of civil aviation. The second point to focus out of Resolution 27 is how to consider urgently the establishment of a high body with the industry. And this is to regularly provide strategic advice to the Council concerning innovation in aviation. The third point is how to regulate innovation, recognizing that the nature and pace of innovation require regulators at the national, regional, and global level avail themselves of new methodologies that facilitate the timely evaluation and assessment of technological developments. Recognizing also that ICAO provisions apply to all civil airspace users, and some additional comments. The additional comments is just to reflect the other opinions that during the discussion in the Council or during bilateral discussion, we are able to capture it. So the presentation can take the 2 opinions. So if we come to the core objectives, the options or combination of options retained by the Council would target to understand better the strategic impact of innovation on all strategic objectives and encompass the global aviation system. Moreover, it should reinforce enhance ICAO's leadership position in the area of innovation. For the core principles, the establishment of relationship between ICAO and the private sector is governed by Assembly Resolution A1-11, the first assembly, relations with private international organization. We have also good governance principles. Some of the other presenters focus on it. I will just mention it quickly. Transparency, independence, effectiveness, and efficiency. And lastly, there's some opinions adding equity as the fifth principle. Some additional comments. Innovation is very crucial to the entire aviation industry. Actually, it is a major tool for better aviation, safer and cost-effective. It is the future hope for the coming generations. But we have some questions. Are we addressing the same industry members that we are dealing with now, or new players on the domain of innovation? We have to be sure that we have a clear vision. Where is the gap and how to fill it? Are the new innovators organized in well-recognized bodies? Are the new innovators exist outside the aviation domain while their products have impacts on the aviation industry? Are they in relation with the aviation players by any means? Next slide, please. It is a recommendation, the final one. We have to have a thorough review of objectives and principles on the light of Article 44 of the Chicago Convention, which talks about the aims and objectives as stated in Chicago Convention. It is to foster the planning, the development of international air transport, encourage the art of aircraft design and operations, to have a regular, safe, efficient, and economical air transport to prevent economic waste. So, and promote generally the development of all aspects of international civil aeronautics. The other recommendation, a clear problem statement should be defined to analyze the gap. I'm happy we have seen a proposed problem statement mentioned today by Ms. Thilly. The participants and the council will see if it truly and precisely reflects the situation and if it needs to be amended. Options on how to best respond and how to fill the identified gap. Further discussion on the nature of the high-level body and its role. Clear terms of reference. Clear definition of titles used. The leadership of ICAO should be preserved. The role of ANC should be clearly identified. Suggestions of the addition of the principle of equity, which I mentioned it before. The consultation process should be inclusive and reach out beyond the international organizations accredited to ICAO, as a number of companies developing innovative products or services applicable to the aviation sector may not have working relationship with ICAO. Consider the past and current relevant experiences of ICAO cooperation with the industry, namely the Future Aviation Culling Team, FACT, ICAO Industry High-Level Group, IIHLG, and Future Aviation Technical Team. All those are bodies established to similar purposes under ICAO. In a nutshell, we have new players. They are able to impose themselves. We are able to identify them. recognize their importance to the development and modernization of the industry. They can take us to a new horizons. Now, we would like to bring them in our domain. What we are discussing now is how, when, what is the suitable way, but definitely not why. Mr. President, by this I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative of Sudan, in particular for the recommendations that actually outline the framework of our work and the direction where to go. And in particular, you mentioned the role of the ANC, and with this, I give the floor to the president of the ANC. The Air Navigation Commission is at the forefront of ICAO vis-a-vis innovation. They face innovation in their day-by-day work, I would say. So I wish to ask the President of the Navigation Commission to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And many thanks to the organizers. Special thanks to you, Mr. President, for inviting the members, states, and industrial observers of the ANC to attend this informal briefing. It's very important to always have the Council and the Air Navigation Commission together. Next slide, please. The core objectives and principles of ICAO are those in the Chicago Convention. At the base is the use of aviation to bring people of the world together and to serve them. Insofar as innovations can foster the safe and orderly growth of aviation, and recognizing that they can help deliver on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, Goal 9, which recommend to build resilient infrastructure, promote sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. So the objective of ICAO with respect to innovation has to be to allow for the safe, orderly use of innovations in aviation for improving the lives of people everywhere. This statement requires a few assessments to be made. Is this an innovation that can help people? And if so, how much? Most innovation will have good uses, but not all uses are equal. A drone that delivers food to an urban society is not the same as a drone that delivers medication to a remote area. This type of assessment is sometimes called a use case. And it is important because in the example, if one solves for the use case of delivering food in an urban setting, then one has not solved the other use case. In other words, the objective has not been reached. Can one know if it is safe? This is a key question, as is the related question of when and how would we decide when it is not safe? And does that depend on the use case? A drone may not be allowed to operate because it cannot reach safety level, but does that level change depending on if it is delivering food to a house of medication, to a village? The regulators may not have the technical knowledge in-house to understand whether something is safe. We need to make sure we have innovation in our regulatory processes to address this. At the United Kingdom Civil Aviation Authority, for example, they have sandboxes and regulatory laboratories where regulators can gain expertise alongside the innovators who are leading the advances. And the CAA then separates out the staff doing the certification from those directly involved with the innovators. Safety may not be the only thing we care about. It might be as safe as what we already do, but be a lot less expensive or more reliable or more easy deployable or more environmentally friendly, etc. In this context, we will also need to understand how safe we want things to be to get these other advantages. While some values like safety is clear, it's not so clear for the term orderly. The new innovation should be introduced into the system in a manner that do not prejudice the ongoing continuity and interoperability of safe, on-time, environmentally conscious flight operations. And that requires us to consider principles. This is important because we don't want to end up with someone getting an unfair advantage through the aviation system. And it's complicated because newer aircraft and systems will need to share finite resources such as frequency spectrum and airspace. This is not a new issue, so ICAO has already developed key principles through the global air traffic management operational concept, so the ICAO document 9854, as an example here to better understand. They are, next slide please, safety. The attainment of a safe system is the highest priority in air traffic management, and a comprehensive process for safety management is implemented that enables the ATM community to achieve efficient and effective outcomes. Humans. Humans will play an essential and where necessary central role in the global ATM system. Humans are responsible for managing the system, monitoring its performance, and intervening when necessary to ensure the desired system outcome. Due consideration to human factors must be given in all aspects of the system. Technology. The ATM operational concept addresses the functions needed for ATM without reference to any specific technology and is open to new technology. Surveillance, navigation and communication systems, and advanced information management technology are used to functionally combine the ground-based and airborne system elements into a fully integrated, interoperable, and robust ATM system. This allows flexibility across regions, homogeneous areas, or major traffic flows to meet the requirements of the concept. Information. The ATM community will depend extensively on the provision of timely, relevant, accurate, accredited, and quality assured information to collaborate and make informed decisions. Sharing information on a system-wide basis will allow the ATM community to conduct its business and operations in a safe and efficient manner. Collaboration. The ATM system is characterized by strategic and tactical collaboration in which the appropriate members of the ATM community participate in the definition of the types and levels of service. Equally important, the ATM community collaborates to maximize system efficiency by sharing information, leading to dynamic and flexible decision-making. Continuity. The realization of the concept requires contingency measures to provide maximum continuity of service in the face of major outages, natural disasters, civil unrest, security threats, or other unusual circumstances. The next slide, please. So now we need to also consider that the new wave of innovation is coming from outside of aviation. Many companies had not been involved in aviation before. Many of the technologies were not developed specifically for aviation. We can also not ignore the fact that many companies are not used to the level of scrutiny that we demand in aviation. We want innovation to serve the core purpose of ICAO and not ICAO to serve innovation. So one clear objective must be for us to welcome the innovators and get them to be more familiar with our responsibilities and processes. It's our duty to make sure they recognize our role to protect the public interests and work with them to ensure that we achieve the safe, orderly use of their innovations. To welcome innovators, reconsider the scope of industry in the sense to be more inclusive and find ways of including non-traditional aviation players. That is beyond the international organizations accredited to ICAO, which may not have a working relationship with ICAO. Increase visibility on ICAO's work and main functions for innovators that are non-traditional aviation players, and define the scope of innovation. This is a steep learning process for both sides. And yes, it would have been easier for us if innovations kept coming from the usual suspects. So beyond the objectives and principles, we need to commit. Commit to studying, commit to teaching, commit to find ways to hold discussions with a larger group of people and interests, commit to working with other sectors. And at the end, thank you very much again. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President of the Navigation Commission. As I said before, we will move the discussion in a more comprehensive way at the end of the 4 sessions. But if there are questions, of course, specific on these 2 presentations, I will be glad to give the floor. I have just one question for the President of the Navigation Commission. Very interesting your presentation regarding the several aspects that will or should be faced by ICAO with innovation. The industry is already part of the Air Navigation Commission. In this sense, do you see that the working methods within the Navigation Commission are effective with industry? Should be some enhancements, there should be some changes. We are talking about a high-level body, that means with the council, in connection with the council. But what about from your experience in the Navigation Commission?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Okay, for the Air Navigation Commission, the industry has always been a part of our work. If it is here in Montreal for the ANC itself, of course, we have our colleagues from the associations and the representatives of the industry, all of them with us in the chamber as observer that interact to all discussions we are having here, if it is the official ones or the ones for the subgroups of the Air Navigation Commission. For our panels, we have 17 panels, and we have just created a new one that will meet in a few weeks for the first time. Just an example, the new one we're creating now, the personnel and licensing and training panel, we have sent invitation to 15 specific member states of the ICAO and 6 industry associations to become member. And so for observers or more members, there is no limitation. So it has always to be balanced depending on the workload. In the other panels we are having, of course, the industry is always there. And there are also other regional groups that are working with us, that are reporting, of course, to us, where in some of them you have the chair of the group is from the industry. So it is a combination we are having here. The problem that we are facing maybe now is how to integrate these innovators, the ones that are not part of the system, the ones that are maybe not acting directly in the aviation sector. For just one example, that is not directly now related to the ANC, but that I am facing personally when I'm traveling. I have always to take my passport with me, and I'm wondering why. A couple of years ago, I had always to have a printed ticket. I don't use that anymore. I have my phone. My ticket is on my phone. Why can I not have my passport in my phone? And here, okay, it's a huge discussion related to cybersecurity, to facilitation, to many other things, but it can be the future. And this will be the one who will put that, will be an innovator that has nothing to do with the aviation. The same for the cabin comfort in aircrafts, etc. The ones who are putting that cabin or constructing it or will put new technologies there, they have nothing to do with aviation. But they have to understand how aviation works. If I put a part in an aircraft, for example, somewhere in Europe, I need an EASA Form 1. So it has to be certificated, etc., etc. All this process, of course, for us in the Commission, it is all maybe easy to follow since we are technical experts, and we can have this discussion with our technical experts from the industry. So to go directly to the council, so everything technical has to go through the ANC anyway, and the ANC is cooperating with the industry. So I think it's, well, it needs just more maybe communication and discussions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President of the Aviation Commission. Indeed, this is exactly what has been said also in the introduction of the, in the first session, that at the technical level, there is already close cooperation and a constructive approach with the industry. What we are talking about is at the strategic level, giving advice, providing advice to the council on aviation innovation. Okay, if there are no other request of intervention, so we move straight to the fourth session. And again, I will ask Erwin Lassoy to introduce the fourth session.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now we hopefully have a better comprehension of ICAO's current practices with regard to innovation. Also its gaps, the areas of improvements, and also the core objectives and principles. Based on this, let's now start our final session, and a very interesting session on the options, how to address innovation in the faster changing world with new players in aviation. During this session, we will not only look at the various options, but also discuss the associated risks when selecting one of the options. In order to stimulate your thoughts, we also look at a pragmatic example that was implemented recently in ICAO with success to address our aviation sector challenged by COVID. Mr. President, the floor is yours again.
Okay, so we start now with the first presentation from Christelle Damar from the SPCP that will address the risk mitigations. Please, Mrs. Damar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, Madam Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished participants, good afternoon. This presentation is aimed at providing a common level of understanding of what the options are regarding the possible establishment of a high-level body with the industry. We'll also look into the main differences between those options and, more importantly, how they compare to one another from a risk management perspective. We'll also spend some time on the principles that will be embedded in the practices of any selected body. So you have seen this slide already in the setting the scene presentation from Thilly. The reason why we're bringing those four options to your attention is that Assembly Resolution A4027 was very open on the nature and the structure of a possible high-level body. So we decided to approach our work with an open mind and consider options that ICAO is very familiar with, such as a council committee, and also include options on which ICAO maybe has a little bit less experience, such as a ad hoc high-level body. This list is, of course, not exhaustive, and we count on the feedback that we will receive via the responses to the online questionnaire to maybe throw some light on a relevant option that we would not have considered yet. The fourth option, no high-level body, can be considered as our baseline, and we needed to integrate it in our analysis at the very least for comparability. This slide presents an overview of the main commonalities and differences between all options. A Council Committee on Innovation would follow the rules and procedures of the Council, whereby, I quote, it may establish other commissions, committees, working groups, either standing or temporary, end of quote. It means that it would provide advice to Council on its ongoing work, and that the private sector would be observer to this process through the relevant accredited international organizations as per current rules and practices. In the case of a high-level body, either ad hoc or permanent. We would seek for a high-level representation from industry, say CEO level, and we would design a mechanism that would associate stakeholders that are not necessarily members of these accredited international organizations, as we recognize that the innovation community is broad and diverse. In both cases, high-level strategic advice would be provided to council, and recommendations would be subject to consultation from established council committees, working groups, and panels of the Air Navigation Commission, ANC. The reason why we think it would be a good idea to have these recommendations screened is that first, it would cross-fertilize the work of the high-level body and the established council committees, working groups, and panels of the ANC. Second, it would avoid duplication of work or interference with ongoing work. And third, it would minimize the risk of potential conflicts of interest. The main difference between the ad hoc and the permanent high-level body is, of course, their time duration of the mandate, which may have an influence on the dynamic of the discussions. And amongst the range of options to be considered, it was important to also present the no high-level body option, whereby the problem statement introduced to you by Thilly in her presentation would be addressed through the implementation of existing measures and the implementation of clauses 1 to 4 of the Assembly Resolution 840/27. However, this option entails risks, as do all three others. My colleague Connie Hart will introduce you to a risk assessment exercise that we carried out in order to objectivize the discussion and the choice of option. Connie, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Christelle. Before I go through the potential risk and opportunities for each of the high-level body options, I wanted to provide quick background on ICAO's risk assessment process. As you can see on the slide, the risks are classified into 4 primary risk categories called strategic, compliance, financial, and operational. Now, I'm not going to go into too much details here. As you can see, the definitions have been provided. Within these 4 categories, there are also some key risk areas covering the scope of ICAO's enterprise risk management framework that have also been defined, such as potential risk impacts on ICAO's reputation, its programs, its strategies, financial management, and so forth, that were used in assessing the risk and opportunities on each of the high-level body options. Next slide, please. We will then apply the 4 risk categories against ICAO's risk assessment scoring methodology that you can see in this table to provide not only a qualitative, but also a quantitative risk rating measurement to assess if a risk is considered high, medium, or low. Without getting too technical, the overall risk assessment criteria to determine if a risk is assessed as high, medium, or low is based on the potential risk impact to ICAO. So that would range from insignificant impact to catastrophic, plus the likelihood that the risk will occur. So that's just a quick background on ICAO's risk assessment process. Next slide, please. So now, using the risk categories and the risk assessment methodology that I just went through in the last 2 slides, we have identified the potential high risk in red text, medium risk in orange text, and low risk in gray text, along with the opportunities that are highlighted in the solid gray areas that you can see in this table for each of the 4 high-level body options. So note that I'm going to be sharing quite a few key risks and opportunities here that have been identified so far, but we would like all of you to advise on any changes or additional risk and opportunities that should be included in this table. We'll send a questionnaire after today's briefing to all of you. Now, starting with the ad hoc high-level body, we've identified 2 medium and 2 low risk. The first medium risk for the ad hoc option is that it may be seen as duplicating ongoing work at the technical level. And the second medium risk is that having the private sector influence, it may be seen as breaching potentially ICAO's ethics framework. The 2 low risks for the ad hoc option include first, it could be seen as having a potential conflict of interest. And the second low risk is that there will be some temporary cost required from the Secretariat in order to support this option. So besides these risks, there are also 7 potential opportunities or benefits of selecting an ad hoc option. So including first, ICAO can be seen as being agile and able to respond with targeted action. The second is that the involvement of external executive stakeholders can provide independent depth of knowledge and the expertise to help elevate innovation ideas. Third, the program design and implementation strategy is strengthened. And the fourth opportunity is that the current established ICAO decision-making process will not be affected. Fifth, as the ad hoc option is a temporary time commitment, there may be more willingness of partners to participate at this high level. Six, ICAO is also better equipped to face risks linked to changes in its operating environment because it understands this environment the best. And the seventh and last benefit of the ad hoc option is that if all innovation stakeholders are represented, ICAO's understanding of the long-term impact of innovations will help to advance its resilient strategies to emergencies and then the crisis events. Now let's move to the second high-level body option that you can see here, and that is to have a permanent high-level body. This option is similar to the ad hoc option that I just went through, except that it is a permanent body. So with the permanent body option, there are 3 potential high, 3 medium, and 1 low risk identified. Starting with the high risk, the first one is that ICAO's response may be seen as not being agile. So there's a risk of losing momentum in the medium to short term, which may then be reflected on the program design. The second high risk is the potential increased interference with the technical work due to the long-standing nature of having a permanent body. And the third and last high risk is that the unlimited time commitment due to the permanent nature of this type of option, it might discourage partners from participating. The 3 medium risk identified here for the permanent option includes, first, the body may be seen to be potentially duplicating ongoing work at the technical level. Second, the undue influence from the private sector may also be seen as potentially breaching ICAO's ethics framework. And the third and last medium risk identified is that permanent Secretariat resources will be required to support a permanent option. There is 1 low risk for the permanent option, and that is the influence from the private sector on ICAO's activities. It may lead to potential conflict of interest situations. Now, in addition to these risks, there are also 6 potential opportunities identified in establishing a permanent body. The first opportunity is that ICAO may be perceived as addressing the challenges linked to a fast-changing environment. Second, the ongoing involvement of external executive stakeholders will help provide independent depth of knowledge and expertise to help elevate the innovation ideas. The third benefit is that the program design and implementation strategy is strengthened in the short term. Fourth is that the established ICAO decision-making process will not be affected. The fifth opportunity linked to changes in the operating environment as it understands its environment better. And the sixth and the last opportunity for establishing a permanent body is that if all innovation stakeholders are represented, ICAO's understanding of the long-term impact of innovations may also help its resilience to emergencies and crisis events. Now, moving to the third high-level body option, there are 4 potential high and 6 medium risks identified in establishing a council committee on innovation option. The first high risk identifies that ICAO's response may not be seen as agile. The second is that ICAO limits its interactions to the traditional aviation stakeholders, so it might be perceived as not being able to engage with the entire innovation community. Third, the governance may be seen as too rigid and not able to adapt to the fast-changing innovation environment. And the fourth and the last high risk to consider is that non-traditional innovation stakeholders may not be willing to cooperate with ICAO due to the lack of a proper process to take their input on board. In addition to the high risk, there are also 6 medium risks identified for having the council committee option, which includes first, the strategic direction of program design and deployment may not fully address the challenges raised by innovations. Second, the absence of input from the non-traditional innovation stakeholders may also hamper ICAO's ability to anticipate in future innovations and their impact on the delivery of ICAO's programs. The third medium risk identifies that the committee may be seen as duplicating ongoing work at the technical level. The fourth medium risk is a perception that ICAO is not fully addressing the challenges related to the increased pace of innovation, which may limit its ability to mobilize extra budgetary resources. Fifth, we will require ongoing secretarial resources to support the council committee option. And the sixth and last medium risk is the potential lack of long-term visibility on innovations that will have an impact on international aviation, which may prevent integration in crisis preparedness and response. So in addition to these risks that have been identified, there are also 2 potential opportunities for the council committee on innovation option. The first one is that the rules of procedure for the council will still apply. So that will help prevent undue influence from the private sector in its decision-making. And second, the influence from the private sector on ICAO's activities is limited. And as a result, so is the risk of any potential conflict of interest that may arise. And then finally, the last option is to not establish a high-level body. Now, if this option is selected, there are 2 potential high and 5 medium risks to think about. The first high risk is that ICAO may not be perceived as handling the challenges linked to fast evolving environment at the strategic level. And the second high risk is that ICAO's governance would not be affected, but may lack the capacity to adapt to a fast evolving environment. There are also 5 medium risks of not having a high level body. So that includes first, the strategic direction of the program design and deployment may not fully address the challenges raised by innovation. Second, the absence of a high level body may hamper ICAO's ability to anticipate future innovations and their impact on the delivery of ICAO's programs. Third, there's also the perception that ICAO may not have the adequate governance to handle the challenges related to the increased pace of innovation, which may limit its ability to mobilize extra budgetary resources. Fourth, ICAO may not be considered as a partner of choice to work on topics related to innovation in aviation, as it may be perceived as not handling it properly at the strategic level. And the fifth and last potential medium risk is a lack of long-term visibility on the innovations that will have an impact on international aviation. So again, that will prevent ICAO from integrating them in its crisis preparedness and response. The only opportunity or benefit of not establishing a high-level body is that there will be no additional resources required from the Secretariat to set up any high-level group. So just to summarize, I've just shared quite a lot of potential risks and opportunities for you to consider and think about in assessing each of the 4 high-level body options that were just presented by Christelle. So if you have any changes or any additional risks and opportunities to include in any of these 4 options, you will get a chance to do so through a questionnaire that will be emailed to all the delegates after today's briefing. So thank you for your attention, and I will now hand over to Christelle to finish up the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Connie. So indeed, we just want to spend a few more seconds, I would say, for the sake of time. I will not go into the details of this slide, but we wanted to give the assurance that independently of the principles that will ultimately be endorsed by the Council, and no matter the end choice that the Council will make on the type of body that will work on the matter of innovation, Secretariat will develop working arrangements that will allow for the implementation of these principles in the day-to-day work of a body. And these working arrangements would be adequately captured in terms of reference of the bodies. So here, we have a little bit of a color code to show how the principles will be translated into working arrangements. In terms of next steps, I would say our final plea would be for you to provide input and feedback on what you've heard today, especially now on the options, risks, and opportunities by the means of the online questionnaire that will be circulated after the meeting. And the responses to the online questionnaire will be analyzed and fed back during the second informal meeting next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Damat. Thank you very much, Mrs. Hart, for very interesting presentation that has given shape to the 4 options that have been discussed during the last session. And now we see more, let's say, clearly what could be the substance of these options and what would be the risk, associated risks. Now we move to next presentation, and this is the last one, that is the experience of the chairperson of the CART. Actually has been appointed very recently as a chairperson of a CART, and I wish to thank him again for the efforts that is producing for the leading this task force. But the experience of the CART has been relevant because we have had the involvement of the industry in the respect, of course, of the rules of procedures of council committees, but in a very innovative way. So, representative of Equatorial Guinea, chairperson of the CART, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to everybody. I will be very brief. My presentation will be based on 3 important aspects. A lot has been said by the previous speakers. I think what I would like to share with the rest of the group is how CART operates, how it was established, and what has been some challenges. With these few remarks, let's go to the first slide. There is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an unprecedented situation. And as a result of that, 19% of international traffic was dropped suddenly. So ahead of us, we have, as a good example of innovation or new paradigm. Ahead of us, we had a new paradigm. What was the reaction of ICAO? ICAO, as a specialized agency for international aviation, immediately identified several challenges and needs. The need to address the immediate challenge faced by aviation industry and states. Second, the need to prioritize action and deliver fast to enable essential aviation operation. Third, the need to address long-term impact, including economic and financial impact on the aviation sector and socioeconomic impact on states. Additional to that, member states emphasize to ICAO, 1, in providing a prompt, coordinate, harmonized, and impact response to COVID-19. Next slide. As a result of that, on 9 March, the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, composed by Council member states, industry, and international organization, was established and was tasked to identify a recommended strategy, priorities, and policies to support state industry based around 3 pillars. Which are those 3 pillars? 1, to address the challenge faced by state and the civil aviation industry due to COVID-19 in the immediate term. 2, to facilitate restart of aviation operation in a safe, secure, sustainable, and orderly manner. as soon as practicable, taking into consideration the evolution of the pandemic and decision by international and national public health authority. Third, to build a more resilient aviation system in the long term. Next slide. As a result of that, in June, the first main step taken by CAT was one, to issue a report, a take-off guide and document, which basically guide 10 important principles and 11 recommendations. Additional to that, the so-called roadmap guideline also was issued. Now, the question here would be, what was next? What could be next in order to address the COVID-19 pandemic emergency and situation? As a result of that, member of task force was being not only established from member state, but also part of the members from industry, from UN sister organization, and the effort in terms of having efficiency and flexible work arrangement, avoiding delay and unnecessary formalities, close coordination with Secretariat and other stakeholders to avoid duplication of effort, and synergy and partnerships, including tools, give a positive result in terms of deliverable. Now, next slide. What lesson have we learned during this period? Here we have to confess that the prompt action taken, as I said, thanks to the better coordination, effective coordination, involvement of all parties, both industry, the Secretariat, and the Council, the results as reproducing the take-off guidelines, restart, the result of releasing the roadmaps, it was an important achievement. Now, does it mean to say that we get everything resolved? The answer is no. It was a lot to learn, and we continue learning. Just to share with you some aspects which we think that are important to share with you in terms of lesson learned. The lesson learned are being some of them part of social economic multidimensional impact of COVID, and others are really purely technical issue. For example, need for harmonization at national, regional, and international level between policies, communication, guidance material from various organizations and stakeholders. The second lesson we learned was the need to distinguish between essential, desirable, or optional measures. The third equally important lesson learned was a whole of society approach is crucial, whereby the benefit of innovation in aviation should be weighted against their potential risk. Now, needless to mention something very important, from geopolitical point of view, what type of lesson we learn as possible facts that it could stop our speed. One of them was we need, first of all, to ensure that leadership, solidarity, transparency, trust, and cooperation as essential. Next slide. Now, again, we realize that COVID is not only threatens, technically speaking, the society, or legally speaking, the society as large. Is threatening in terms of cohesion and obviously interconnectivity within countries and regions. Similar technology progress can create a social divide between those who have access to innovation and those who don't equitable access to innovation, and ensuring protection of human rights in the application was essential. The other lesson learned we have to point out was reliable information and data. It was an asset in order to give prompt, effective, and efficient response. In a nutshell, the lesson learned can be summarized as follows: harmonization of different practices, the possibility of moving and responding fast, at the same time making sure that rule and regulation standard as per ICAO should not be undermined. Mr. President, I hand over to you as a summary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, person of the card, for having outlined this success story for ICAO in terms of a cooperation and relationship with the industry. We have now 20 minutes left, less than 20 minutes left, a conclusion of the 4 sessions. So we address the gaps, we have addressed the areas of improvements, we have addressed the core objectives and principles for the ICAO to work on innovation, and we have addressed the possible options and risks. Now it's time to have a discussion, having in mind that on the basis of the discussions today, we will provide some inputs for next briefing next week. We start with the representative of Spain, Mr. Aguado, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to all the presentations, because they were excellent presentations from the beginning till the end. Let me give you a first reaction to several items. First of all, in my personal opinion, there is no there are not 4 options, there are only 2. I think that's what we are seeing from the analysis. And these 2 options are either we have an ad hoc body or we have a permanent body. And here I come with the last presentation by the chairman of CART. This is a typical example of an ad hoc high-level body. And there is nothing that impedes us to create another high-level ad hoc body to deal with any other issue, if necessary, in an urgent matter. But when we are discussing this coming from the Assembly, probably this is not what the Assembly was thinking. The Assembly was looking more to a permanent body. Now, from the SPCP, there were a number of principles and working arrangements that I agree with. This will be the basis. This is the frame in which we have to build whatever solution we want to present to the Council. From the presentation of the recommendation from the SPCP, I don't know if I understood correctly, and I think it was Christel, saying that the recommendations of this high-level body will have to go through consultation with working groups and etc. I hope I didn't hear well. A recommendation to the Council and will be for the Council to take a decision to consult with other bodies, but not being automatically consulted with working groups and technical bodies. It is up to the decision of the sovereign body of the Council to take that on board. So it is just a reflection, but I didn't hear out the explanations. And finally, Mr. President, I don't know if you will agree with me, but research and development is not the same as technology, and technology is not the same as innovation. So let's not confuse the terms. But ICAO needs a strategic engagement with industry on all those 3 domains. And this strategic engagement is because of the role of ICAO to develop global standards that meet safety requirements and orderly requirements, as it was mentioned by the President of the Air Navigation Commission, for the introduction of solutions into the international civil aviation. And this is what we have to address. I mean, we are not trying, or we should not be trying to regulate innovation. We cannot regulate technology. What we have to be dealing is with developing global standards for the safe, orderly introduction of solutions into international civil aviation. So with these remarks, Mr. President, I will be able to write those remarks, if necessary, for the next meeting in the next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative of Spain. Indeed, regarding your comment that I missed the aspect that you mentioned regarding the machinery beyond the relationship between this potential high-level body and the council, of course, but the machinery will have to be decided by the council. So it's the council that has the authority to decide who consulted, how should be the organization of this consultation mechanism. But this is something that can be addressed more in detail maybe next time. Now we have the representative of Mexico that has asked the floor. Representative of Mexico, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to all the presenters for this very interesting and rich in content of the presentations. I would like to very brief in my intervention. I think from all the presentations, that coming from the Japanese representative and the Russian Federation speaker and also the president of the ANC raise very important things to be considered in the establishment of this high-level body or on this activity or strategy. I think they raise areas of concerns, or as to be, we have to establish what is the play of ICAO in order to address all of these issues. And I think they have to consider for the future work and for the next meeting. I think we have to the best way to include that feedback from those states. Also, regarding to the what kind of body we have, of course, my initial thought is we have to establish maybe a non-permanent body or permanent committee, because that implies many things to consider, resources and working methods and several things. Of course, I don't agree in the statement of the committees must be rigid in the process decision making, because thanks to the committees, the council has the opportunity to facilitate the work of the council in the consideration of many issues, especially in a very controversial or complicated issues. I think the committees play a key role in ICAO work. But however, I think we have to start maybe with something not permanent in order to gain experience. And after that, we decide if we have the necessity to evolve in a committee or in another more formal or permanent body to consider in the future. But first, we have to gain some experience, taking in consideration that CART is one of the possible options model. But of course, in any kind of model we have or the council decide to establish, I think one thing is very important to consider, and is the participation, at least to follow the discussions from all the states are be present in ICAO, not only the council. I think the participation of the state members in ICAO, I think is important to follow the discussions and to participate in this kind of meetings in order to have a better comprehensive approach and better understanding. And of course, if we have to have some successful in this task mandated by the assembly, and I think it's important to consider that. And also similar to Spain, I would like to express we don't lose the focus in our main responsibility, and it's established in the Chicago Convention. ICAO has a responsibility to do some specific areas of work, and of course the innovation and development and research and the technology are welcome to work like ICAO, but we have the best way to address that in or how we incorporate these issues in our work, but never focus what is our main responsibility. And of course, the issue of the conflict of interest is something to take in consideration. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative of Mexico, for your very wise reflections, so that must be taken in consideration. Representative of China next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon to everyone. Today's briefing was very informative. Many thanks to the presenters and the speakers for their excellent presentation and the comments. And especially the comments, the points raised by the representative of Japan and the president of ANC are very important. If we may take a look at the current gap existing in this organization, in particular at the council level, I believe how to get access to the most updated and comprehensive information on innovation should be one of the biggest challenges. I wish to bring to your attention that compared the Secretariat and the ANC, which are equipped with professionals, council members are with more diversified background other than the technology front. Well, when we discuss how to establish or streamline the mechanism of promoting innovation in this organization to ensure the council timely obtains the essential information on innovation should be put on our agenda as one of the priorities. In this regard, the ANC talk made a very good case of enabling its members to effectively obtain information about new technology from the industry. I would like encourage the similar trial of ANC talk to be introduced to the council as one of the areas for improvement. Other than that, I also suggest we may regularly invite the industry representatives, ANC and the Secretariat, to brief the council and the application of new technologies and developments, ideally through the enhanced mechanisms of debriefing and the knowledge sharing, so that the council can be updated in a timely manner and kept in pace of the innovation field. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative of China, for this interesting comment. Actually, the ANC talk has been mentioned several times during the briefing. We have to consider that two issues could go together, because the ANC talks are more informative, while on the other side we are talking about the establishing of an advisory body. So maybe that the two issues should be considered in combination. Now I have the representative of Australia asking for the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to all of the speakers that we've heard from today. You've given us a lot to think about in coming weeks. And I did want to note that it's good to see a few names and companies appearing in the participants list that we don't normally see in ICAO meetings. And to you, very much a warm welcome. And I hope we see more of you. A lot of the focus in this discussion has been on establishing a body. And I think we do need to remember that this is only one of the 5 tasks the Assembly gave us in Resolution A4027. I think the key message that we need to take out of that resolution is that we need to update the organization internally and revolutionize how we work at all levels. It would be very easy to do what ICAO always does and create a new or different body or platform that institutionalizes our conversations within the Montreal bubble and tick off a task that we've done a task that the Assembly gave us. This would, however, be an easy way out and would reinforce the distinction between those who are inside the tent and those that are outside the tent. The greater challenge that we need to embrace is to change the culture of the organisation and move it to a flatter, more flexible operation in which there is greater engagement at all levels of an outwards facing organisation. In terms of the Assembly's task to consider establishing a high-level body, and that's partly what we're doing today, we need to focus in this on the outcome of facilitating genuine engagement at the strategic level with the executives of companies and institutions, the innovating, not on talking amongst ourselves or on having meetings or on building self-sustaining institutions, again, within this Montreal bubble and reinforcing the strength of the bubble. In short, Mr. President, I think we need to make sure we build dialogue and not institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative of Australia, for your comments. Indeed, we need to reinforce the Montreal bubble. A very interesting expression. Representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to you all. I think it's morning still with you. I particularly want to build on the comments made by the previous two speakers, the representatives of Australia and the representatives of China. I think both raised some very key points. I think it's important not to lose sight of what the tone of the resolution and the point of the resolution, which was not, as Sam says, about building process, but about engaging with the industry more regularly, more systematically, frankly, and getting away from the situation where we just have one state of the industry briefing per year, and that's it. That's the limit of our engagement. And focusing on the mechanism as we're doing now and trying to get that perfect is, to my mind, going about things the wrong way. And here I come on to what the representative of China said about the ANC talks. This has been a very good initiative. And yes, I take your point, Mr. President, that the approach between the ANC talks and what we're looking for from Council would be slightly different, but the model is the same. Essentially, the ANC talks were established very rapidly, and they are able to, and they've been able to evolve as we've learned from experience. So in some ways, I really feel that this is just, we're in a situation where essentially we as Council just need to take a decision on something very quickly, to establish something very quickly, and then finesse it as we go along, learn from our experience, evolve it as we go along, rather than trying to get it perfect from the outset. We're already a year on from the resolution calling us to establish a better engagement urgently. So we need to move this quickly. I also think one point we need to recognise is that the process goes both ways. I think making the Council more transparent to stakeholders, and that stakeholders beyond the usual suspects in the Montreal bubble, as Sam says, but some of the new innovative companies we're talking about, making the Council more transparent to these partners will increase our engagement. And there's a very easy way of doing it. It might not be cost-free, but there's a very easy way of doing it, which would be to live stream council meetings on ICAO TV. We have ICAO TV. It's an excellent resource. By making what we do in the Council more transparent, what we do in ANC more transparent, that would massively increase our engagement and mean that we are doing something constructive from our side as well. So those are my thoughts to feed in at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative of the United Kingdom. Indeed, the point of making discussions of the Council more transparent is one of my objectives. And by the way, at the end of the story today, we have a participation of more than 100 observers in these discussions that are Council discussions, but engage with the industry. Last but not least, I will have to pass the floor to the representative of the United States with my apologies, because I didn't mention that he joined also the council since last session, and I didn't mention him at the beginning. So Shendo say sorry for this, my apologies, and you are the last speaker in our discussion phase. United States representative, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's great to see you, and thank you to all who presented today. It's really wonderful to follow after our colleagues from Australia and UK. I think we agree with many of the points that they made, especially live streaming. The United States strongly supports the exchange of information and increased engagement with industry. However, we want to emphasize the observations that were made by the representative from Germany, the president of the ANC, and members of the Secretariat. We have existing mechanisms for engaging industry that could be better utilized and improved. We do not need to create a new bureaucratic structure that could very likely become a stagnant echo chamber and involve a major increase in workload for both ICAO and for industry. In order to retain the flexibility we need to adapt to the unpredictable changes that come with innovation, our working method should remain informal, ad hoc, and non-permanent. Our council industry dialogue should ensure that participants and topics change regularly. This will ensure that council gets a broad perspective of what's happening in aviation and the sectors that support it. Without specific context, the term innovation is nothing more than a catchphrase. As the Assembly resolution mentions, we need the Council and the Secretariat to innovate in how they conduct their business, including live streaming. ICAO needs to exemplify transparency, accountability, and integrity, and it needs to become more outward rather than inward looking. In choosing new external partners, we must ensure that they possess and will bring the industrial knowledge and expertise that will add value to Council's work. As we all know, involving pressure groups and gatekeepers will not add value to our work. To move forward, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what is the real problem statement that we are trying to address? What are the tools we already possess, and how can we use them better? What changes are absolutely necessary? We don't need to reinvent the wheel here, but we do need to improve the way we work. So thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you to the members of the Secretariat, and thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, representative of the United States. And with this is the last intervention that closes our first briefing. Just a few words in conclusion. I've seen that there is a lot of convergence, first of all, in the willingness to implement the resolution that has been adopted by the Assembly. Of course, with regarding the gaps, has been underlined that the gaps are already identified actually in the same resolution, and that there is a need of having a strategic approach in the relationship with the industry. Time response is very important. We have also seen a proposal of ICCAIA that I will circulate after this meeting, as I said before, but 2 or 3 let's say, take away and take from the final conclusion, our final discussions, that are, first of all, there is a convergence. I feel more on the ad hoc group, but of course, this is something that will have to be discussed further next time. Something flexible, something simple, no structure or overstructure that is complicated the relationship. Keep in mind the mission of the organization that is outlined in the Chicago Conventions, and on the priorities, as mentioned several times, to make some experience, to gain from the experience of CART, of course, and to work in this direction in order to facilitate the deliberations of the Council on innovation in aviation. With this, I believe that we can thank very much the Secretariat for having organized this informal briefing. We will have next week another informal briefing that will have to continue the discussion about on the basis of the conclusions today. We will then have a proposal that will be submitted to the council for decision during the 221st session. With this, we close the meeting. I thank very much all the participants. It's been a pleasure to see so many faces, some new, some not new, but participating for the first time in a council briefing. Thank you very much. With this, I don't have the bell, I don't have the, but with this, I close this first informal briefing, and we'll meet again in informal meeting next week, while I wish to remind that this afternoon we will have the first committee meeting, TCC, with the financial committee. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
May I add some administrative remark, please?
Yeah, please. Please go ahead, Erwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. I just want to remind everyone, and it's stated several times, that after this meeting, an email will be sent out to all the participants of the informal briefing with a link to a questionnaire, and it will be sent by the Secretariat. This will enable us to capture your thoughts on the content of the presentations today, and I really strongly encourage you to fill this out, because the aggregated results of the questionnaire will be very essential to guide our ongoing conversation and will be shared with you during the next week's second informal briefing. I will remind you that the briefing will start already in 1 week from now, so we need to be fast with analyzing these questionnaires. So I hope you can provide your thoughts, your ideas within about 24 hours from now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Erwin, for having reminded this and given this task. I recommend to the industry that have not spoken not to fill in the questionnaire. Thank you very much. The meeting is over. Have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Bye, Mr. President. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye, Mr. President. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.